In just 37 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actresses would be thrown off a British talk show in absolute disgrace. What started as polite conversation exploded into a full-blown screaming match that left the studio audience gasping, cameras shaking, and Ruth Langsford pointing her finger directly at Meryl Streep's face, telling her to get out. This is what really happened last night on Loose Women, and it's uglier than anyone expected. The lights were bright in the studio as Meryl Streep walked onto the Loose Women set, waving to the cheering audience with that famous smile everyone knows. She wore a beautiful navy blue dress and looked happy to be there, settling into the purple chair across from Ruth Langsford and the other hosts. The applause died down, and Ruth started things off the way she always does, with a big smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So lovely to have you here, Meryl," Ruth said, leaning forward slightly. "You're in London for the new film, and we're absolutely thrilled. But I have to ask, because our viewers are dying to know, there's been quite a bit of chatter about your comments on British acting versus American acting. Care to explain what you meant by that?" Meryl's smile faltered just a little bit. She shifted in her seat and clasped her hands together. "Well, Ruth, I think there's been a bit of a misunderstanding there. What I actually said in that interview was that British actors bring a certain theatrical training that's really wonderful, and American actors often come from a different tradition. I wasn't making a comparison about who's better." Ruth's eyebrows went up, and she glanced at the other hosts before looking back at Meryl. "That's not quite how it came across, though, is it? Because what people heard was that you think British actors are somehow more properly trained than Americans. Isn't that a bit insulting to your own country's talent?" The audience went quiet. You could feel something changing in the air, like when storm clouds roll in before rain. Meryl's face changed too, her friendly expression becoming more serious. "I really don't think that's fair, Ruth," Meryl said, her voice staying calm but getting firmer. "I've spent my entire career celebrating actors from everywhere. I've worked with incredible British actors and incredible American actors. I would never put one above the other." Ruth wasn't backing down, though. She tilted her head and did this little laugh that sounded sharp. "But you did say it, Meryl. We have the quote right here. You said British actors have a depth of classical training that gives them an edge. Those were your words." "Context matters, Ruth," Meryl replied, and now her voice had an edge to it too. "I was talking about a specific type of training, not making a blanket statement about talent. And honestly, I'm a bit surprised that you're twisting my words like this." One of the other hosts tried to jump in to calm things down, but Ruth held up her hand and cut her off. "I'm not twisting anything, darling. I'm simply reading what you said. And I think our viewers deserve to know if you really believe that." Meryl's jaw tightened. "What I believe is that good acting is good acting, regardless of where someone is from. But if you're determined to make this into something it's not, then I don't know what to tell you." "Well, that sounds rather defensive," Ruth shot back, and there was something mean in her voice now, something that made the audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Perhaps there's more truth to it than you want to admit." Meryl stared at Ruth for a long moment, and you could see her deciding something. When she spoke again, her voice was icy. "I came here to have a pleasant conversation about my work, Ruth, not to be ambushed with deliberately misinterpreted quotes and hostility." Ruth's face went red. "Ambushed? That's a bit dramatic, isn't it? Though I suppose that's what you actors do best, make everything theatrical." A few people in the audience gasped. Another host tried again to steer the conversation somewhere else, asking Meryl about her preparation for her new role. But Ruth talked right over her. "No, I think we need to address this," Ruth insisted. "Because, Meryl, you've built this reputation as this perfect, untouchable actress. But maybe you're not quite as gracious as everyone thinks. Maybe you actually do look down on people." Meryl's eyes went wide. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" "You heard me," Ruth said, and she was leaning forward now, aggressive and sharp. "You come on our show, you make these comments about British actors being better trained, and then you act offended when we ask you about it. That's pretty rich." "That is absolutely not what I said, and you know it." Meryl's voice was rising now, loud enough that everyone could hear the anger in it. "You're deliberately trying to create drama where there isn't any." Ruth laughed, but it was a nasty sound. "Oh, so now I'm the problem? Classic. Come on our show, insult our actors, and then blame the host when you get called out. Very classy, Meryl." I did not insult anyone. Meryl was almost shouting now. Her face flushed. You're putting words in my mouth that I never said. This is ridiculous. The other hosts were looking at each other with worried faces, clearly uncomfortable with how bad this was getting. One of them put her hand on Ruth's arm, trying to get her to calm down, but Ruth shook it off. What's ridiculous, Ruth snapped, is you sitting there acting like you're above all this. You know what? I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, and most of them have the decency to be honest about what they've said. But you're just defensive and rude. Meryl stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Rude? You've been attacking me from the moment I sat down. You didn't want an interview, you wanted a fight. Oh, sit down, Ruth said dismissively, waving her hand like she was shooing away a fly. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? Meryl's voice was shaking with anger now. You've been incredibly disrespectful this entire time. You twisted my words, you attacked my character, and now you're acting like I'm the one being unreasonable. Ruth stood up too, and now both of them were on their feet, facing each other across the small table. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. This isn't Hollywood, Meryl, where everyone kisses your backside. This is real television. Tough questions? Meryl laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call deliberate misrepresentation and personal attacks? Because where I come from, we call that bad journalism. The studio had gone completely silent except for the two of them. The cameras were still rolling, catching everything. The producers were probably having heart attacks in the control room, but nobody stopped it. Ruth's face was getting redder and redder. How dare you come on my show and call me a bad journalist? Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who expected professionalism, Meryl shot back. Someone who thought I was coming here for a real conversation, not to be ambushed by someone with an axe to grind. An axe to grind? Ruth was practically spitting the words now. You're the one who came here with your superior attitude, acting like you're better than everyone else. Well, newsflash, sweetheart. You're not. One of the other hosts stood up quickly, trying to physically get between them. Ladies, please, let's just take a breath and stay out of this, Ruth snapped at her, and the poor woman stepped back, looking shocked. Meryl was breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I have never in my entire career been treated this way on a talk show. This is absolutely appalling. Then leave, Ruth shouted, pointing toward the exit. If it's so appalling, get out. We don't need you here. You know what? I will, Meryl shouted back, because I'm not going to stand here and be verbally abused by someone who clearly has some kind of personal problem with me. The only problem I have, Ruth said, her voice dripping with venom, is with fake people who pretend to be nice but are actually arrogant and condescending. You're not the person everyone thinks you are, Meryl Streep. Meryl's mouth dropped open. For a second, she just stared at Ruth like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The entire audience was frozen, watching this disaster unfold. This is insane, Meryl said quietly, but her voice was still shaking with rage. You don't know the first thing about me. You've decided to attack me based on absolutely nothing. And now you're making wild accusations about my character. This is beyond unprofessional. This is just cruel. Ruth crossed her arms. Oh, please, spare me the victim act. You're a wealthy, successful actress. I'm sure you'll survive someone finally telling you the truth. The truth? Meryl's voice went up again. You wouldn't know the truth if it hit you in the face. You've been lying about what I said since the moment I sat down. I read your exact quote, Ruth yelled. Out of context, Meryl yelled back. You deliberately took it out of context to make me look bad. And when I tried to explain, you just kept attacking. That's not journalism, Ruth. That's just being a bully. The word bully seemed to hit Ruth like a slap. Her whole face changed, getting even angrier if that was possible. A bully? How dare you? I am the host of this show, and I ask the questions that need to be asked. No, you attack people. Meryl was fully shouting now. There's a difference between asking tough questions and just being nasty for the sake of it, and you crossed that line a long time ago. Ruth took a step closer, and now they were really in each other's faces. You need to leave my show right now before I have security remove you. I already said I'm leaving. Meryl grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I wouldn't stay here another second if you paid me. This show is a joke, and you're a terrible host." "Get out!" Ruth screamed, actually screaming now, her face purple with rage. "Get the hell out of my studio." "Gladly." Meryl turned and started walking toward the exit, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. The audience was absolutely silent, every single person watching with their mouths open. But Ruth wasn't done. She followed a few steps behind Meryl, still yelling, "And don't come back! We don't want you here! Take your Hollywood ego somewhere else!" Meryl spun around one more time, and the look on her face was pure fury. "My ego? That's rich coming from someone who just threw a tantrum because I wouldn't play along with your nasty little game. You should be ashamed of yourself, Ruth. You really should. The only shame here is you." Ruth pointed her finger right at Meryl's face. "Coming on British television and disrespecting our actors and then acting like you're the victim. We see right through you. You don't see anything except what you want to see." Meryl's voice cracked a little bit, like she might cry but was too angry to let it happen. "You decided before I even got here that you were going to make this ugly, and that's exactly what you did." By now, security guards were actually coming onto the set, looking confused about whether they should do something or not. One of them approached Ruth and said something quietly, but she waved him away. "I don't need help," Ruth told the security guard. "She's leaving on her own because she can't handle the heat." Meryl let out a harsh laugh. "The heat? Is that what you call being needlessly cruel to someone who did nothing to you? You're delusional, Ruth. Absolutely delusional." "Get out!" Ruth screamed again, and this time she actually stamped her foot like a child having a tantrum. "Get out of my studio now!" "I'm going." Meryl turned back toward the exit, walking quickly now, her whole body tense with anger. "This is the most unprofessional experience I've ever had, and I've been in this business for 40 years. Ruth was still following her, still yelling. "And in 40 years, no one's ever called you out on your nonsense before. Well, congratulations. Today was the day." Meryl reached the door that led off the stage and grabbed the handle, but she paused one last time to look back. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. And when she spoke, her voice was shaking but fierce. "You know what, Ruth? I actually feel sorry for you. Because someone who treats people this way, who deliberately tries to hurt and humiliate others for entertainment, must be really unhappy inside. I hope whatever is making you so angry gets better. Because this," she gestured at the studio, at Ruth, at everything. "This was just sad." Ruth's mouth opened and closed, but for once, she didn't have a comeback ready. She just stood there, breathing hard, her fists clenched at her sides. Meryl didn't wait for a response. She pulled the door open and walked through it, and the sound of it closing behind her echoed through the completely silent studio. For a long moment, nobody moved. The cameras kept rolling, catching Ruth standing there in the middle of the stage, the other hosts looking shocked and uncomfortable, and the audience sitting frozen with disbelief on their faces. Then someone in the audience started whispering, and that broke the spell. People started talking all at once, their voices getting louder and louder. The other hosts huddled together, clearly trying to figure out what to do. One of them looked at the camera and tried to smile, but it came out wrong, shaky and uncertain. Ruth slowly walked back to her chair and sat down heavily, like all the energy had drained out of her at once. Her face was still red, but now she looked less angry and more something else. Shocked, maybe. Or possibly starting to realize how bad that had been. The producers must have been screaming in her earpiece, because she suddenly sat up straighter and looked directly at the camera. "Well," she said, her voice hoarse from all the shouting, "that was certainly unexpected. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back..." She trailed off, like she couldn't figure out what to say next. One of the other hosts jumped in quickly. "When we come back, we'll be discussing today's topics with our panel. Stay with us." Her voice was too bright, too cheerful, obviously trying to pretend like everything was normal when everyone in that studio knew it absolutely wasn't. The cameras finally cut, and the studio lights dimmed slightly as they went to commercial break. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. The audience, the crew, everyone watching at home had just witnessed Ruth Langsford completely lose control and have a screaming match with one of the most famous actresses in the world. They'd seen her attack Meryl over and over, refuse to listen to explanations, make personal insults, and ultimately drive her guest off the show in disgrace. Ruth sat in her chair, and from where the audience was sitting, You could see her hands shaking. The other hosts weren't looking at her, weren't talking to her. They were whispering to each other and glancing nervously between Ruth and the door where Meryl had disappeared. Backstage, you could hear raised voices and the sound of people rushing around, probably trying to find Meryl or figure out what to do next. Someone dropped something, and the crash made everyone in the studio jump. The makeup person came over and tried to fix Ruth's makeup, which had gotten smudged during all the yelling, but Ruth pushed her away irritably. "Just leave it," she snapped, and the poor woman backed away quickly. One of the producers came onto the stage, a tall man in a headset, and he bent down to whisper urgently to Ruth. Whatever he said made her face go even redder, and she said something back that made him straighten up fast and shake his head firmly. They argued in harsh whispers for a moment before he walked away, looking stressed and angry. The audience was buzzing with conversation now, everyone talking about what they'd just witnessed. You could hear people saying things like, "I can't believe that just happened," and "Did you see Ruth's face?" and "Poor Meryl. She didn't deserve that." Some people were even getting up and leaving, like they didn't want to be part of this anymore. Through all of this, Ruth just sat there, staring straight ahead with this stubborn expression on her face, like she was determined not to admit she'd done anything wrong. But her hands were still shaking, and every few seconds she would glance toward the door where Meryl had left, and something would flicker across her face. Not quite regret, but something close to it. The stage manager started counting down to coming back from commercial break, and the other hosts scrambled to compose themselves. They arranged their faces into professional expressions, but you could tell they were rattled. The whole energy in the studio had changed from fun and light to tense and uncomfortable. As the lights came back up and the cameras started rolling again, Ruth straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, clearly ready to carry on with the show like nothing had happened. But everyone watching knew better. Everyone had seen what she was capable of, how quickly she could turn on someone, how cruel she could be when she wanted to make someone look bad. The show went on, but it was awkward and strange. The hosts tried to laugh and joke about their next topics, but it felt forced and fake. The audience barely responded, still shocked by what they'd witnessed. And through it all, there was an empty chair where Meryl Streep had been sitting just minutes before, a reminder of exactly what had gone down on Loose Women that night. Off in the distance, beyond the studio doors, Meryl Streep was probably already in a car heading away from the building, putting as much distance as she could between herself and the disaster that interview had become. And in the studio, Ruth Langsford was trying to pretend everything was fine, but the truth was written all over everyone's faces. Something terrible had happened here. Something that showed exactly who Ruth really was when the cameras were rolling and someone dared to push back against her attacks. The whole nation had watched her explode with rage, had seen her chase a respected guest off her show with screaming and insults, and there was no taking that back. No matter what happened next, people would remember this night, would remember how Ruth Langsford treated Meryl Streep, and it wasn't going to reflect well on her at all.